right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining for the session. Very excited to have Becca Millstein here. Please give it up for Becca. Love to get a little audience participation early. Hopefully warm you up for some of our jokes. All right, not that one, I guess. All right. Well, we're very happy to have Becca here. She's the CEO and co-founder of Fishwife. Any Fishwife fans in the audience? If not, you will be after this session, I guarantee you. I actually had a tin of Fishwife, I was telling Becca backstage, for breakfast this morning. It's the coolest tin fish brand in town. I bought it from my local grocery store, the trendy one that all the hip young people go to. But apparently this year, Fishwife has also expanded to Target and Costco, so huge breakthrough.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now doing 8 figures in revenue, and it's been an incredible journey over the last 4.5 years. So super excited to have Becca here. And obviously a huge part of Fishwife is the brand. So we're here to talk about the brand. But I guess just to begin with, Becca, do you want to give a little quick intro, talk a little bit about yourself and how you got into this whole fish business?
Of course. So I'm Becca. I'm from New Hampshire. I live in LA, and I started working on Fishwife 5 years ago. I worked in the music industry for about 4 years before starting it and focused on brand partnerships and marketing and community building. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So one day I had a light bulb moment that there was this $3.5 billion industry in the US, the canned fish category, that had really never been premiumized or really innovated in. And it felt like it was time to take the category a step up, create a brand that was focused on really, really delicious, high quality products, interesting flavors, sustainability, and a very unique, differentiated brand positioning. So that's what I set out to create in 2020.
And it's tasty. I had the spicy tuna albacore tuna this morning.
Yep.
From Galicia, Spain. Highly recommend. And what did the earliest days at Fishwife look like? How did the journey begin, and what did the team look like?
Yeah. So I was working at a startup when I came up with the idea to work on Fishwife. I had never really been around people that were starting and running their own businesses. So being at this startup, it occurred to me that it was a possibility for someone like myself to create my own business. And that was really enlightening. I think I found at a startup, it was really, sort of the environment I was looking for, sort of a limitless possibility that was really exciting to me. So when I started working on the company, I immediately called every person I knew that was at all involved in entrepreneurialism, whether it was a small business owner or a scaled startup CEO. I really just spent the first month talking to everyone I knew that was involved in startups generally. And then kind of at the same time started building the brand. That was my natural orientation, was the brand building element. Obviously, supply chain was something that I had to learn very quickly. But I had a very clear vision of what I wanted the brand to look like. I wanted it to harken back to sort of traditional Spanish and Portuguese conservas. I don't know, how many people in this room have seen, that beautiful sort of artisanal Portuguese or Spanish tin fish? Raise your hand. Who's been to Portugal? Okay, so some of you guys are familiar with it. I wanted to speak to that and bring that to an American audience because I knew people were so entranced by it. People that have traveled to Portugal and Spain were so, inspired by it. But I wanted it to feel obviously modern and ideally timeless. That's what we all want for our brands, is for them to feel timeless and generational. So I decided that I really wanted to work with an illustrator, which is kind of a unique choice when you're creating a brand. A lot of people will start by reaching out to branding agencies. I think that, is a natural inclination for most. I think because I was comfortable with building brand, I really wanted to find an artist who could be sort of my co-creator of this brand and evolve the brand with me. So I sort of dug into the annals of the internet and found a bunch of illustrators. And that was when sort of my surveying of my community began. All of you know this, I'm sure, but obviously staying really close to your customers is tantamount to running a really successful business. So started that practice day one, surveyed a few illustrators with friends, family, et cetera, and then found an incredible illustrator. And we've been working together ever since.
And you said you had this vision for what the brand could look like from day one, basically. And I'm just curious, like, how did that vision actually manifest to you? Was it just like an aha moment? Was it like a little bit more calculated, where you did research and you thought about it a bunch? Was it just something that you went off feel? Like, what were the instincts that actually drove you to developing the brand as you did?
Yeah, it was pretty intuitive. Like I wanted it to feel, have some element of nostalgia, without putting it on too thick. So wanted to use primary colors, sort of bold, simple, evocative graphics. So we came up with this idea for the Fishwife, and actually came up with the name for the brand the day after deciding that I wanted to start a tin fish company. And the Fishwife herself, just to give you guys a quick background, the word fishwife dates back to the 15th century, and originally was just a totally neutral term that referred to the wives of fishermen who sold their husbands' fish at the market. But because fresh fish is so perishable, they gained a reputation for being very loud and bossy and swearing a lot, which really resonated with me. So, we locked into this idea of the Fishwife, and there was so much built into that name already and sort of the identity of the Fishwife that then identified the visuals and the voice of the brand, which obviously all come together to create the brand.
Yeah. And would you recommend following a similar process for other founders, like mostly basing it off intuition, trying to find something organic, or do you feel like it can work a lot of different ways in trying to build a brand?
Yeah, I would just say those conversations that I had early on, whether I was, reaching out to friends of mine that I felt might have something to contribute to this conversation, just people I thought were maybe hot on the trends, or, other startup founders. So many great ideas came from those early conversations. So for example, the name Fishwife came from a friend that runs a textile company. So I did not go to her looking for a brand name, but just having those conversations with really creative people who are probably good at things that you're not, ended up generating so much material that was really foundational to the company.
And the name works. We were just talking to someone backstage, another speaker, who got hooked on the name, I feel like. So the name has been that thing that kind of like pops in there and serves as the hook for the company, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah, it's actually much smarter than naming the company Mercury, because there are a lot of Mercuries out there. So it's been a difficult journey trying to find the right trademark for that. But it still works pretty well. And then how did you try to think about balancing modernity and nostalgia? So obviously it's like a very fresh brand, but there's so many elements that harken back to earlier ages. And how did you think about balancing that?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be careful not to be too derivative. So I think, or to, again, lay it on too thick. I think when people set out to create, let's say, a nostalgic brand, you might come away with something that feels a little kitschy. So, the way that I approached it, it's not rocket science. I created a very simple mood board with the Portuguese and Spanish conservas, and then I really had 3 or 4 brands that I really resonated with. So it was Cafe Bustelo. I don't know if you guys know that, ready to drink coffee brand. Topo Chico, again, just a super classic brand. Mikkeller Beer, which is a Danish beer company, has really beautiful illustrations. So I kind of brought all those elements together, and they communicated, we want primary colors, we want, black outline, we want really simple graphics, sort of an classic Americana tattoo style almost. And gosh, I can't remember what your question was. When I talk about the brand, I get very excited.
Yeah, the passion shines through. But yeah, I think you did a great job answering.
Yeah.
We can probably move on to something a bit more tactical, I guess, and just talk about how the initial days of actually getting the brand out there. How did you focus on getting the word out about Fishwife on a very lean budget, I assume, to begin with?
Yeah, so we were on a super lean budget to start. I bootstrapped the company for about 8 months and then raised about $500,000 in a friends and family round. But before that, the way I started getting the word out was, really getting the brand right, which I won't talk about brand forever, but I will just say, if you get the brand right, the name, the visuals, the positioning within the category, that feeling really fresh, differentiated, and new, and the product needs to exist, everything will be so much easier and cheaper from there out. So, by really investing in getting all of those elements right, which again, for us, it was not a financial investment. I paid the illustrator, he had never done a brand before, $500 to make a logo, $500 to make, the first mock-up of a tin. But investing in the time to find the right partner, whether that is a branding agency or it is a friend that can advise on brand, or it is, an illustrator, an artist, just getting that right made everything else, made all the other efforts so much more multiplicative. So the way we got the word out was getting that right, and then did a bunch of product seeding. And I would say the notable thing that we did here, because obviously everyone does product seeding, is the company was just me at the time, and I was reaching out to every influencer that we worked with. And this is advice that I give, every founder that I meet is, do everything basically for the first year, which of course is a different scenario if you're bootstrapping versus, if you go out and raise a $10 million seed round, the expectations are going to be different. But for me, forming those relationships with the influencers we seeded to, saying, hi, my name's Becca. I just started this company. I would love to send it to you. Same thing for journalists. I reached out to every journalist that we pitched to for the first year and a half of the company. I just thought of that as at the ground floor of the business, building these relationships directly instead of through a publicist or even through a team member. It just felt like that also had this multiplicative impact that lasted years and years.
How did you find the right influencers? Like, what spoke to you? How did you find the right people to actually work with on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because before I started this company, I didn't have Instagram. I really wasn't in tune with sort of the influencer landscape.
And it's less common in tech right now, so.
Yes, I'm sure. It really is just, as basic as it sounds, just kind of running through Instagram and TikTok and probably spending too much time just going to, who they recommend you to look at. I wouldn't say I had the most efficient process, but it definitely worked.
So let's say you had a very lean brand budget right now. Let's say it's like 50K or something. Would you focus on social as a channel, or how would you think about the right mix of different ways to get the word out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, we obviously invest a lot of time and energy in both organic and paid social. At the beginning of the company, we did not invest anything in paid social. It was purely organic, which I think we probably stuck to a little too long. We probably should have started spending on paid a little earlier. But I do think the emphasis on organic social and getting sort of a foundation of customers that come to you purely because they're interested in the brand, I think that resulted in us getting very high levels of engagement very early on. And that also really seems to perpetuate, is laying that foundation of high engagement and a very strong ratio of followers that are engaging with your posts. It's something that is very hard, I have found, to get later on in the business. So let's say, you spend the first year of your business investing a ton in paid social, not a lot in organic marketing, and kind of from the beginning, you have pretty low engagement on social. I won't pretend to know the ins and outs of the algorithms, but it does kind of start you out on your back foot. So if you try to, increase engagement over time, it's a lot harder than if you kind of focus on really high quality content from day one. So I would just say, if you are interested in growing your social channels, make sure you're focused on that from the beginning, really creating high quality, engaging content, because it's hard to pivot once you've sort of established, much more paid traffic than organic at the beginning.
So it sounds like the brand really just instantly clicked, basically, right? Like there wasn't some process of iterating through it or trying to figure out what the customer might want more of. It was more, you put the vision out, you focused a lot of time on it, you made it to a really high standard of quality, and it just had organic uptake, right?
Yeah, I think what we did right was we created a product that needed to exist. There had never been a brand, especially one that was building a direct consumer audience. I think that's one thing to note is we started D2C and then expanded into retail and Amazon as the years went on. But there had never been a canned fish brand that was building a direct customer relationship. And there had never been a canned fish brand that was, so beautifully illustrated and was, speaking to customers like they were friends. So I think from day one, we created a very differentiated positioning in a very dusty category, and that has, of course, served us along the way.
Yeah, the parallels with tech are very obvious, I would say. You might not think it, but between canned fish and banking services, whatever else you might be building, it's all about building a great product and making sure the customer actually feels something, I guess.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about the community now? Like, did you intentionally cultivate the community? I know you said you had a lot of early fans. When did you know that it was like really working and you had this passionate fan base? And did you intentionally do anything to grow that community?
Yeah. From the beginning, we created many touch points consistently to connect with our customers, whether it was on social, on email, IRL. We started doing events, 3 months after we launched the company. Extensive surveys. We send essentially one in-depth survey every month to our customers. We just created many different channels of communication to be in touch with our customer base. And that resulted in this very close feeling community and a community that felt like they could give us very quick feedback and that we would be able to iterate on it very quickly. And we're intentional to demonstrate that we were taking that feedback. So, we would get a suggestion to make a hat, and we would make a hat, and we would say, thank you guys for giving us the idea to make this hat. And then a lot of people would buy the hat. So, I think just showing your customer base in whatever way makes sense that you are truly listening to them, not only that you're surveying them and getting their insight, but that you're actually actioning on it, that just means so much to customers.
How many customers would you say you talk to like in a typical month?
Oh my gosh. I'm in the DMs probably too much. I would say probably 20 through some means or another, whether it's, showing up. We have an extensive demo program. So if you're ever at Whole Foods and you see a Fishwife brand ambassador, please say hello. So whether I'm actually connecting directly with a customer, in the DMs, on a call, et cetera, we run this brand ambassador team in-house. And after every demo, they have to complete a long survey where we get so much information about what people are saying, about the products, about the brand. So that really keeps a live feedback loop as well.
And what does the team at Fishwife actually look like now?
Yeah, so we're a super small team. I think that's probably the soapbox that I will stand on. We're 7 people. We're about to be 10, but it took a lot to get me there. I think I've always been really focused on every team member having an extremely high degree of autonomy and responsibility. And they work very hard. And that's the piece you have to, watch out for is, making sure these folks don't get burned out. In startup life, it's really hard to avoid. But I think they feel so much ownership over their areas of business, and that has just tremendous impacts on, I think, how quickly we're able to work, how efficiently we're able to work, and the level of output we have. So I will say we have significantly less employees than many businesses that are our size. I think because we really try to hire for people that are entrepreneurs in their own right and are looking to build a tremendous amount of skills at this company. And that's something we talk about all the time.
And how do you find the right balance between giving your team a lot of ownership and autonomy and also maintaining super high brand standards?
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like everyone's just naturally on the same page, or how did you try to scale that instinct?
Yeah, I do think that giving people so much responsibility and so much credit, it just does result in them holding themselves to a very high standard and wanting to be proud of their work. Because it's true, responsibility is not very diffused at a company. When you have a company of 7, it's very clear who owns what. It's very, very clear. So when there's a big win in ops, there's 2 people that we're looking at and saying, great job, guys. So I think that it just results in them holding themselves to a very high standard because, it's very clearly their output. And obviously, when we're interviewing, we select for folks that have a very high high standard for their work.
Great. Our finance person, I don't know if he's here, but I'm sure he loved that answer. Do you have any examples of really scrappy high ROI campaigns where you felt like you kept it super lean, but then the ROI was massive?
Yeah, I'm like, that's every campaign.
Yeah, love it.
I think one thing that I strive to do is find partners that can really amplify our efforts. So I think there have been a couple examples where we've done this very effectively. The first was our partnership with Fly by Jing. Do you guys know Fly by Jing, the Szechuan pantry staples company? So that was our first major collaboration about probably 8 months into the company being live. And, obviously, we weren't paying for anything. These were two relatively new brands. Fly by Jing had been around for a couple of years more than us. So we were definitely, benefiting a ton from their brand halo. But we were also sort of the new player in town. So we both had something to gain from that partnership. And, again, it didn't cost us anything. We created a really incredible product. We created a beautiful product. We created this beautiful collaboration between these two buzzy brands. And that product has become, it's either our 1 or 2 top seller at any time. And we've kept it around for 4 years. I think the other example of that is we did a partnership with Klaviyo. I'm sure a lot of you guys know the email communication platform. And we really wanted to create a really special experiential marketing opportunity, a pop-up in New York City. But we didn't feel comfortable investing the full marketing budget to bring that to life. So we found this partner, Klaviyo, that had a lot to gain from, associating with a young, buzzy company, and a lot to gain from, obviously, the work that our team was going to pour into it. But they were able to support financially and bringing it to life, and then ended up creating a national TV commercial and a national billboard campaign. So I think, we completely have built this business off of collaborations, and I'm sure it's a very different landscape when it comes to tech products. But I just can't emphasize how impactful, the right kind of brand collaboration can be.
Yeah, if you got the right product and the right brand, everyone wants, a bit of that clout, I guess.
Yeah.
And you actually just had a recent one with Bon Iver. I saw that, yeah.
Yes. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the musician Bon Iver. A lovely guy, lives in the woods. It's kind of part of his brand. But he reached out to us to do a collaborative product that sort of told the story of an album that he was coming out with, which was all about salmon. So we created this co-branded salmon product together. And I think the one thing to highlight about this collaboration in particular is that it actually was a very low lift collaboration. We didn't create a new tinned fish product. We created a new box. So I think that's another lesson we think about a lot with our marketing campaigns is how can we make as low a lift as possible for our team? Because, as mentioned, we're only 7. We do probably 4 brand partnerships a month. How can we make this, as low lift as possible with as high impact as possible? So, we were able to partner with Justin, create this limited edition packaging, and, we got 26 sort of very high quality press hits, so much social traction. And yeah, it was a really high impact collab without all that much effort.
So did he just text you, or how do you actually reach out?
His label emailed me, and then we were talking, and then he emailed me, and he was like, "Hi, I'm Justin." I don't even know if he's a Fishwife fan. He just said, "I want to make this product," and I was like, "Great, let's do it."
Love to hear it.
Yep.
It's getting it done, Scrappy.
Yep.
I think we have maybe just a little bit more time for going into questions. So maybe the last question I'll end on here is, I think people might be wary about spending money on brand, especially early on. And how do you think about what the right level to invest is, and just how to think about putting money into something that for a lot of founders might end up feeling kind of risky, or a little bit harder to figure out what the ROI might be?
Yeah, it's a really great question because we spend so little money on brand marketing, and we're known for being this very powerful brand marketing engine. Of course, what we're spending on brand marketing is the team's time and resource. But again, that really comes down to, some of my time, about 20% of my time, and then I have one brand marketing manager who's a junior level employee, not an extremely expensive employee, and she and I kind of go at it together. So I would say when you talk about investing in brand, what does that really mean? I think it means different things for everyone because, for myself, that is my natural inclination. So it's cheap for Fishwife. It is really cheap because it mostly comes from me and it's not a heavy lift. I think when you consider it for your own businesses, I think first of all, you have to take a really hard look at yourself. When you're starting a company, obviously the founders in the room know this. You have to know your strengths and weaknesses very intimately. So I think, when you're starting to answer the question of how do I manage brand, am I as the CEO or is this a strength of mine? Or do I really need to bring someone into this business who has a very strong aptitude for brand creation? So I think that's kind of the first step as you think about investing in brand is you will need someone on your team full time who has a very strong sense of brand. If that's you, great. Make sure it is. Like, you need to get some people around you that will give you honest feedback and tell you if you have an aptitude for this or not. And if you decide that you don't, I think what you need to invest is the time in finding someone that really understands your vision and can help bring it to life. Whether that is, a full-time person on your team, or it might be, part-time to start. It might be a publicist that's really incredible at executing your vision. But I think that's where I would start, is just having someone on your team that has really great taste and understands what you're trying to communicate. And everything else, again, will be so much cheaper once you have that really, really strong brand perspective in-house.
Cool, great perspective. I think we have some time for audience questions, so microphones over there if we have any, maybe here in the back. Oh, I guess we can start here, just out of convenience.
Microphone over here too. Thanks for coming. Enjoyed the talk so far. In relationship to your rollout, you kind of glaze over it with direct to consumer, and then now eventually you're on shelves, see your product all the time on Amazon, all these other third-party sellers, et cetera. Was there a point early on, even, it sounds like you had the concept, you said day 2 of the brand very, very purely and crisply. Was there a initial feedback loop at the direct-to-consumer point where you were like, oh, actually, people don't like this one color, so we'll swap it with a lighter blue for the primary blue, or things like that, as well as later on, now there are tons of people who saw your success and clearly are imitating it and saying, no, tin fish is it's hot, so we need to get in on that. And they're these big companies with tons of money to start with, and they're starting on the shelves, they're starting on all these third-party sellers. How did your growth either help you or hurt you being something that started direct to consumer, and were there primary pivots early on that you can share with us that kind of helped with that slow growth?
Great question. So the way that we actually launched, we did a soft launch in August of 2020. And that was selling 100 of what we called beta boxes to the first 100 people that headed to our website and bought them. This was purely a way to get feedback on the initial product and what people wanted out of a tin fish company. So surveying, and I think this is part of your question, surveying was, inherent in the brand from day one. We weren't looking for their feedback on the brand visuals necessarily. We were looking more for their feedback on product. What products did they want us to start with? Was it tuna? Was it sardines? Was it mussels? Did they want flavors? Did they want smoked products? Did they want really simple products? So I think that's where we started, that's where we started that customer relationship. And again, I think the brand decisions come mostly from within the team, but on things like innovation and product, that is where we really look to our customers to survey. And I think in terms of your second question about, do we potentially have a disadvantage for, we've laid some of the groundwork for this category, and now other brands can sweep in and go straight to Walmart, straight to Target, et cetera, whereas we took, 3 years to get there. I really think we're at a tremendous advantage being a direct-to-consumer, having that direct-to-consumer foundation. I recently joined the board of a company that does not, a CPG company, consumer packaged goods, that does not have a direct consumer relationship. And it became very clear to me that they do not have a way to communicate with their customers. And I was so astonished by this realization because it's basically inconceivable to me to be continuing to scale this company without a daily, weekly, monthly conversation with our customer base. So I think that made me just hone in on how much of an advantage that really is. A lot of food and beverage brands have to go straight to retail because, let's say they're frozen, they're refrigerated, and they can't have a direct-to-consumer business. And that really just made me so appreciative for that direct line of communication and sort of solidified my interest in continuing to survey and continuing to get feedback. So yeah, I still think we're at a huge advantage because they just don't have anyone to talk to when they think about, for example, their product innovation.
We actually have to cut it off there. You hear half an hour, and apparently it's not actually a lot of time. But thanks so much, Becca, for coming on.
Yes.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And serious handshake. Give it up.